It's a collaboration. I think that's putting it too far.
No, you wrote the novel.
It's based on this, right?
Indeed, yeah.
Berserker.
Hollywood called him box office poison in the late 2000s. Then John Wick made over $1 billion, and everyone forgot. But success has a price Keanu Reeves has been paying for decades. He trained 6 months for every film. He did 90% of his own stunts past the age of 50. He pushed through injuries that would end most careers. Now the whispers are starting again. Industry insiders are asking questions nobody wants to answer out loud. What exactly is happening behind the scenes? And why are people close to him suddenly worried? This is what's really going on. Keanu Reeves came into the world on September 2, 1964, in Beirut, and the city around him was already shaking from unrest. Protests kept breaking out. Bombs echoed through neighborhoods, and people lived with a kind of tension that never really went away. Even though Beirut was still called the Paris of the Middle East, cracks were forming everywhere. His mother, Patricia Taylor, was an English costume designer working wherever her jobs took her. His father, Samuel Nolan Reeves Jr., was a Hawaiian Chinese geologist moving from place to place. Their meeting felt like something that could only happen in a city that mixed people from every corner of the world. Keanu was born in the American University of Beirut Hospital, a place that stayed open even when everything else around it felt unsafe. His name meant cool breeze over the mountains, which sounded peaceful in a place that was anything but quiet. As he grew, the world around him became even more complicated because his own identity was a story that never sat still. His father's side carried Hawaiian, Chinese, English, and Portuguese roots. His mother came from Essex and had no Asian background. This blend made Keanu feel like he lived between lines he could never fully read. People often saw him as white passing, and that helped him avoid some barriers, yet he still felt like he didn't belong anywhere. He talked about this many times, saying he felt like he floated instead of fitting in. Maybe that's why his characters later felt so universal. Neo in The Matrix didn't have an ethnicity mentioned at all, which was rare for the time and helped push open quiet doors in Hollywood. Life shifted fast when his parents split in 1966. He was only 2, and suddenly the family broke apart. His father slipped into drinking, then into drug dealing, which eventually put him in prison. Keanu barely knew him. He saw him one last time at 13 during a short visit to Kauai. They sat together under a dark sky and spoke almost no words. The silence between them said more than anything. The next morning, his father brought him to the airport and disappeared. Keanu carried that moment for the rest of his life. He once said his story with his dad was heavy and full of pain and woe. And that silence shaped the way he approached people, trust, and even his work. After the divorce, nothing ever settled. His mother moved him and his sister across countries, and they kept chasing new starts. First it was Sydney in 1966, where his sister Kim was born. Then New York City for a short time. Finally, in 1971, they landed in Toronto when he was 7. But even Toronto didn't feel steady because his mother remarried more than once, and new stepfathers came and went. Keanu never stayed long in one place or one school. He bounced through De La Salle College, Avondale Secondary Alternative School, Etobicoke School of the Arts, and Jarvis Collegiate Institute. He never stayed long enough to create lasting friendships. The constant motion shaped him into someone who adapted fast, but also learned to keep his guard up. Through it all, his mother kept working as a showgirl and costume designer, first in Paris, and then wherever life took her. Her career meant late nights, unstable income, and long stretches where Keanu barely saw her. Yet he always spoke about her with softness. She taught him manners and independence. She showed him creativity through costumes, fabrics, and performance. Years later, at San Diego Comic-Con in 2024, Keanu dedicated his BRZRKR comic series to her and said the words "for life," for storytelling, for love. Everything tied back to her influence. School wasn't kind to him, though. He struggled with severe dyslexia from the start, and teachers didn't understand it at all. Instead of help, they saw him as a troublemaker, someone who wasn't trying. Reading and writing felt like climbing a cliff without a rope. He pretended to understand lessons so no one would see how lost he felt. That pretending slowly became a survival skill. It hurt him deeply, but it also forced him to watch people, to read emotions instead of words. Those skills were the quiet beginning of his acting. The weight of dyslexia pushed him out of the Etobicoke School of the Arts. He admitted he was too rambunctious and talked back too much. Without the right support, frustration kept spilling out of him. That expulsion became a turning point. Traditional schooling wasn't made for someone like him. He attended 4 high schools over 5 years, but none could give him the help he needed. He did well in hockey at De La Salle College and was even voted most valuable player. Yet his academics kept falling behind. He felt like a private kid who lived on the outside of every group he entered. Each school change pulled him farther from belonging, and by 17, he dropped out completely. He said later that he did a lot of pretending as a child. School hadn't offered him anything he could hold on to, so he let it go. Acting became the place where all his pretending and observing finally made sense. He acted in school to cope, and later, he acted to survive. It wasn't about fame. It was about finding air in a world that kept pushing him away. His dyslexia made him rely on presence, movement, and emotion rather than memorizing words. That gave his acting a grounded, honest feel, something audiences didn't always notice, but always felt. His early steps came through Canadian TV. In 1984, he played a teen client in Hangin' In for 1 episode. Before that, he worked as a correspondent for the youth show Going Great. He did commercials, including a Coca-Cola ad, and small theater roles. In 1985, he played Mercutio in a production of Romeo and Juliet in North York. None of these jobs paid much, but they kept him learning and kept him visible. He worked non-stop, building up experience long before Hollywood took his name seriously. Then came 1988 and Permanent Record. He played Chris, a teenager grappling with the suicide of his best friend. It was heavy and emotional, and he handled it with a depth people didn't expect. The film came out on September 23, 1988, and even though it wasn't a massive hit, critics noticed the honesty in his performance. Suicide was rarely addressed openly in films then, yet Keanu carried the role with a quiet strength. But the world didn't know what was coming next. On February 17, 1989, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure hit theaters. It had a small budget of about $8.5 million and was expected to fade quickly. Instead, it earned $40.5 million worldwide and stayed in theaters for an average of 8.6 weeks. People loved it. They connected with its warmth and silliness, and it launched Keanu's Hollywood journey. But the success had a shadow. Hollywood decided he was only Ted Logan. Casting directors saw him as a funny, clueless surfer type. Even though he had shown dramatic range, they didn't take him seriously. He spent years trying to convince people that he was more than one character. So he started choosing roles that forced the world to see him differently. In 1991, he joined My Own Private Idaho and stepped into a much darker, more complex character. To get River Phoenix on board, he rode his 1974 Norton Commando motorcycle 1,300 miles from Toronto to Florida just to deliver the script. That effort changed everything. The film became a critical success, showcased his depth and deepened his friendship with River. It proved that he could walk into difficult stories and handle them with honesty. When Keanu Reeves stepped into the role of Johnny Utah in Point Break in 1991, something started to shift around him. The film premiered on July 12, 1991, and during that opening weekend, it pulled in $8.5 million. As the weeks rolled on, the numbers climbed until the worldwide total reached $83.5 million against a $24 million budget. People didn't just notice the action or the surfing or the adrenaline. They noticed Keanu. Critics said he had considerable discipline and range, and audiences loved the way he played off Patrick Swayze. The story mixed crime with waves, and Keanu pushed himself hard for it. He trained for weeks just to look natural on a surfboard and did many of his own stunts. When the movie found its cult following, he tasted his first real wave of action stardom, and you could feel that momentum beginning to build. That momentum became something else when Speed arrived in 1994. The idea was simple: a bomb on a bus that explodes if the speed drops below 50 miles per hour. But the execution was tight, and people responded to it immediately. Speed opened to $14.4 million in its first weekend and passed $350 million worldwide before it was done. That number alone pushed Keanu into a different world. His performance with Sandra Bullock clicked in a way that pulled people in. He went through physically demanding scenes and even tried a dangerous leap from a moving car to a moving bus. The stunt was attempted, but never used. Yet the fact that he went for it showed how fearlessly he approached the work. By the time Speed had settled into its success, Keanu Reeves had become a global star, and Hollywood finally saw that he could carry a massive blockbuster without hesitation. As Speed's glow spread across the industry, studios rushed toward him. He suddenly found himself in the top tier of action stars, earning between $10 and $15 million per film in the mid-1990s. He had choices: Johnny Mnemonic, The Devil's Advocate. Major offers kept coming because audiences connected with him, not just for his looks or charm, but for the intensity he brought to every role. He pushed himself physically and emotionally, and that balance of strength and vulnerability made him stand out from the older generation of action heroes. His rise felt steady, as if each role strengthened the next. That drive came with bruises, though. His commitment to doing his own stunts meant he carried injuries for years. He spoke openly about neck surgery and knee problems that followed him long after filming ended. One of his worst injuries was a kneecap fracture that he once described as cracking like a potato chip. He ended up on crutches for a long stretch and needed heavy recovery time before returning to work. Even so, he kept going. He kept taking roles that demanded more from him physically because authenticity mattered to him. He believed in earning every scene. Then Hollywood watched something unexpected. After Speed turned him into a superstar, the studio offered him $12 million to return for Speed 2. Most actors would have signed instantly, but Keanu read the script and felt nothing. He later joked about the idea of a speeding bus being replaced with a slow cruise ship, and said he loved the team but simply couldn't do it. Instead, he chose to tour with his grunge band, Dogstar. It shocked executives everywhere because nobody turns down that kind of money for music. But Keanu did, and the choice reinforced something true about him. He followed the work that felt right to him, not the work that paid the most. While his career climbed, something darker was unfolding around him. On October 31st, 1993, River Phoenix collapsed outside the Viper Room in Hollywood. He was only 23. The mix of drugs in his system was intense: cocaine, heroin, morphine, ephedrine, marijuana, and Valium. It was a deadly combination. Witnesses saw him vomiting and convulsing on the sidewalk before paramedics finally arrived nearly 30 minutes later. The delay came from the club's fear of bad publicity. River was pronounced dead at 1:51 a.m. at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Keanu was there that night. He saw everything happen in real time. The shock of that moment hung over him for years. Their friendship had begun during My Own Private Idaho in 1991. To convince River to join the film, Keanu rode a 1974 Norton Commando motorcycle more than 2,300 miles from Toronto to Florida. He wanted River for the role and believed the film needed him. Their connection grew quickly. They understood each other's struggles, and the motorcycle Keanu rode even ended up in the movie. River once said Keanu was one of his closest friends, and Keanu said the same in return. That bond lasted until those final minutes outside the Viper Room, and the loss carved a quiet place inside Keanu that stayed there for decades. For 26 years, he didn't speak publicly about River's death. No interviews, no statements, nothing. Fans wondered why, but people close to him said the grief was obvious. He simply chose silence. Only in 2019 did he finally mention River again, calling him his brother and speaking softly about the pain of losing him. That silence became its own tribute, showing how deeply he valued the bond they shared. At the same time, something heavy was happening inside his own family. In 1991, the same year Point Break came out, his younger sister Kim was diagnosed with leukemia. Her fight lasted 10 years. The treatments were exhausting, and the emotional load was massive. Despite his rising fame, Keanu stayed close to her. He spent months at her bedside and even researched treatments on his own. He balanced filming schedules with hospital visits. The pressure of doing both would have broken many people, but Keanu stayed steady. He stayed present. During the toughest years, he became Kim's primary caregiver. He put projects on hold whenever he needed to. He walked her through chemotherapy and supported every stage of her recovery. He lived near her and adjusted his entire life around her needs. While people saw him on screen as a rising action hero, behind the scenes, he was simply a brother doing everything he could to keep his sister alive. Those years shaped him in ways that fame never could. Then came The Matrix in 1999. The offer was $10 million up front. Instead of stopping there, he negotiated for a percentage of the profits. It was a risky choice. Nobody knew if the film would work or if audiences would understand the Wachowskis' vision. But when The Matrix exploded, earning $463 million worldwide, Keanu's deal brought him about $45 million in total. He prepared for the role by reading books like Out of Control by Kevin Kelly and The Psychological Studies of Dylan Evans. He wanted to understand the philosophy behind Neo, not just the action. While his sister fought her illness, Keanu quietly donated 70% of his Matrix earnings to leukemia research. That was about $31.5 million. He even sold his house to be closer to her, spending around $5 million on her treatments. He set up a private foundation for cancer research and children's hospitals, but he never attached his name to it. He didn't want credit. He never wanted attention for his generosity. To him, it was simply what needed to be done. When the Matrix sequels were released in 2003, the money grew to unbelievable levels. Reports say he earned over $100 million, and some claim the number reached $156 million. That made him one of the highest-paid actors in history at the time, especially when people realized he was earning around $1 million per line of dialogue. Even then, he didn't keep it all. He offered huge portions to the costume team and the visual effects crew because he believed they deserved the success too. It's said that he gave up about $75 million and even bought Harley-Davidson motorcycles for the 12 stuntmen who worked with him. His generosity became part of his legacy, long before his career reached its later heights. On December 24, 1999, Jennifer Syme went into labor at 8 months, and for a moment it felt like the world was holding its breath with her. She and Keanu Reeves had been waiting for their daughter, imagining her first cry, imagining what their lives would look like once she arrived. But instead of joy, the room filled with a silence they would never forget. Their baby girl, Ava Archer Syme Reeves, was stillborn, one day before Christmas, just weeks before her due date, and right at the moment when Keanu's fame was exploding after The Matrix came out in March 1999. What should have been a holiday filled with celebration turned into a wound that never closed. He later said it was one of the worst experiences of his life, and the date sat inside him like a shadow he could never shake. In the months that followed, both he and Jennifer tried to move forward, but grief has a way of changing how people breathe and think and love. Their relationship, once steady and full of warmth, cracked under the weight of losing a child. It wasn't anger. It wasn't blame. It was the simple truth that they didn't know how to heal while standing beside each other. Within weeks, they separated because the sorrow was too heavy to carry as a couple. Jennifer's mother later shared that her daughter never fully recovered and battled depression after Ava's death. Even then, Keanu and Jennifer stayed connected. They drifted apart romantically, but not emotionally. In 2001, they found their way back to each other as friends, and that closeness made what happened next even harder to bear. On April 2, 2001, Jennifer Syme left a party hosted by Marilyn Manson. It was early in the morning, around 6:20 a.m., and she was driving her Jeep Grand Cherokee along Cahuenga Boulevard in Los Angeles. Somewhere along that road, something went wrong. The car slammed into parked vehicles with such force that she was partially ejected and died instantly. She wasn't wearing a seatbelt. Later toxicology reports showed cocaine in her system. She was only 28. When Keanu called the coroner's office to identify her, they told him they already had. It became the second tragedy in just 18 months for him. First his daughter, then the woman he still cared for. It crushed him in quiet ways most people never saw. Keanu has talked about Ava's death in rare moments, saying it was the most difficult experience of his life, and that he grieves her every single day. Time passed, but the ache stayed close. He admitted that losing her changed him permanently, shaping how he sees love, loss, and what it means to keep going when life becomes too heavy. The grief also made him retreat from the spotlight. After Jennifer's death, he stepped away from the huge Hollywood machine and turned towards smaller films. He was a pallbearer at her funeral, and afterward chose roles that didn't demand red carpets or endless attention. During those years, his choices reflected his state of mind. He did movies like The Watcher in 2000, which made $47 million worldwide, and Sweet November, which made $45 million and received harsh reviews. He wasn't chasing blockbusters. He was trying to exist quietly. He joined films like Hardball in 2001, which earned $44 million, and The Gift in 2000, staying away from the pressure that major studios expected from him. He needed space to breathe. Despite the darkness around him, one thing stayed the same. Keanu always believed in the people he admired. He took major pay cuts so others could join his projects. For The Devil's Advocate in 1997, he sacrificed millions so Al Pacino could star. For The Replacements in 2000, he deferred his salary so Gene Hackman could come aboard. He cared more about the quality of the work than the size of his check. Hollywood rarely sees that kind of humility, but it was natural to him. Then came Constantine in 2005, It had a big budget of $100 million and grossed $230 million worldwide. But Warner Brothers still called it a disappointment because it didn't hit the numbers they hoped for. It opened with $29.7 million in the United States, and its legs were only 2.55, which meant the audience didn't keep returning. Still, over the years, something interesting happened. People began re-watching it. They began appreciating its unusual tone and Keanu's performance. Slowly, it grew into a cult favorite, eventually becoming one of the rare films that lived longer than its box office tally. But for a while after that, studios didn't want him at the center of their big movies. Films like The Day the Earth Stood Still in 2008 made $146 million on an $80 million budget, and Street Kings in 2008 made only $47 million. Hollywood started labeling him box office poison. Offers for major leading roles dried up. Instead of chasing what he couldn't control, Keanu turned toward what he loved. He built Arch Motorcycle Company in 2011 with Gard Hollinger. They created custom bikes like the KRGT1 with only around 30 units produced each year. Every one of them hand-built, every one of them shaped by his attention to detail. He also toured with his band Dogstar, playing bass and letting himself be part of something simple and joyful. He found comfort in passion rather than pressure. Then came 2014. John Wick wasn't meant to be a giant franchise. The first film had a budget of only $20 million. Keanu took a pay cut again and accepted around $1 to $2 million for the project because he believed in it. He even negotiated a small ownership stake, trusting his instincts more than the studio predictions. When the film came out, it earned $86 million worldwide. The world loved its style, its violence, its rhythm, and suddenly Keanu Reeves was back in a way nobody expected. By 2023, the franchise had made over $1.1 billion. Chapter 4 alone earned $447 million. In 2019, Chapter 3 even beat Avengers Endgame at the domestic box office during its opening weekend. His salary followed the success. For Chapter 2 in 2017 and Chapter 3 in 2019, he earned around $2 to $2.5 million each. But the real reward came from his back-end ownership, which grew each time a new movie succeeded. For Chapter 4, he earned $25 million, with $15 million upfront and a $10 million bonus. When filming ended, he gifted each stunt performer a personalized Rolex Submariner to thank them. No spotlight, no announcement, just gratitude. His training for these films was intense. At 50, he went through 6 months of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, and Gun Fu. He trained from morning to early afternoon, then hit the gym again later in the day. The team taught him how to flow smoothly between grappling, shooting, and complex movement. For Chapter 3, he trained for another 6 months and did about 90% of his own stunts. Every punch, every fall, every roll came from his commitment to making the action feel real. And while all this was happening, something softer unfolded in his life. In 2019, he stepped onto the red carpet with artist Alexandra Grant at the ALACMA Art and Film Gala. People noticed the way they held hands. They had been friends since 2011, collaborating on projects like his book Ode to Happiness. Over time, that friendship deepened. By March 2023, he admitted publicly that their relationship brought him a deeper connection and stability. They were seen together in 2025, sharing a quiet kiss during a lunch date, and the world got a glimpse of a love that grew maturely and gently. People close to them said it was the most positive relationship he had ever experienced. Behind all of this, he never stopped giving quietly. After his sister Kim battled leukemia for years, he donated 70% of his Matrix earnings, around $31.5 million, to leukemia research. He sold his home and spent $5 million on treatments to help her. In 2004 or 2005, He created a private foundation to support cancer research and children's hospitals, but kept his name off it. He once said he preferred letting the foundation do its work without attaching credit to himself. It has operated for more than 15 years, helping countless families without ever asking for applause. In 2025, at age 61, he stepped onto a different kind of stage. He made his Broadway debut in Waiting for Godot at the Hudson Theater, playing Estragon beside his longtime friend Alex Winter. The show became a success and recouped its investment in 8 weeks. Ticket prices ranged from around $144 to over $592, and the production raised more than $430,000 for Broadway Cares. Critics praised his performance for its honesty and depth, and fans loved seeing him share the stage with his old friend. Even at 61, he trained almost daily, 6 days a week. Strength circuits, martial arts, conditioning. His career was full of injuries, including a back injury during The Matrix Reloaded and a knee injury during John Wick. But he kept going. He avoided stunt doubles as much as possible, believing the audience deserved authenticity. His work ethic and discipline became part of his legend.